Hello, welcome to Prajim Technologies. I am Venkat. This is part 9 of SQL Server. In this session, we'll understand what a unique key constraint is, when do we use unique key constraint or primary key constraint, and the differences between unique and primary key constraints. Now, we use unique key constraint to enforce uniqueness of a column, that is, the column shouldn't allow any duplicate values. If you remember, in this video series we have already discussed a primary key is also used to enforce uniqueness of a column. So when do we choose one over the other? Now we know that a table cannot have more than one primary key. Now let's say in my table I have person ID, which is already a primary key, and I also have email ID, social security number, passport number columns, and I want to maintain uniqueness of each of these columns. Okay, so is it possible to do that using primary keys? No, because why? A table can only have one primary key. So that's when you make use of this unique key constraint. Okay, a table can have more than one unique key constraint. So this is one of the primary differences between a primary key constraint and a unique key constraint, and this is one of the very common interview question that's asked these days. So if you look at this, a table can have only one primary key but more than one unique key. So when do we choose unique key constraint or primary key constraint? If there are multiple columns in a table where you want to maintain uniqueness, then we go for unique key constraint. Okay, another difference between primary and unique key constraints is that primary key doesn't allow even one null, whereas unique key allows one and only one null. So these are the two differences between primary key and unique key constraints. Now, to create a unique key constraint, again, there are two ways. One, using the designer of SQL Server Management Studio, and obviously the other one is to use the query. Now first let's see how to create a unique key constraint using the designer. So we already have this TBL person table, and this table has got 4 columns: ID, name, email, gender ID, and age. ID column is already the primary key column. So if I have one column as primary key, it's not practically possible to mark another column as primary key. Okay, so that's when I use a unique key constraint. Now I want to ensure the email column is always unique. So how do I do that? By creating a unique key constraint. So how do we create a unique key constraint? Right click on the table for which you want to create a unique key constraint, select design, and in the table designer window, right click on any of the columns and select indexes/keys, which should bring up select primary or unique key index window. So look at this. Here you can create primary keys as well as unique keys or indexes. We haven't spoken about indexes yet. We'll be talking about them in detail in a later session. Okay, so we already have a primary key on this ID column, so that's that key. Now let's add another key for a unique key constraint. Okay, since this is a unique key, usually the naming convention is UQ and the name of the person on which you are creating that unique key constraint and the column. Now in our case the column is email. Okay, so you can select your columns here, click on the ellipsis button and select your column, email column. So I want to maintain the uniqueness of email column, and you can specify the sort order. We'll talk about this sort order when we talk about indexes. And is unique? Yes, I want this to be unique, and this is not an index. I want to create a unique key. Close it, save this table. Okay, now if we save this table, obviously we end up creating unique key index. Let's not do that. Let's go and try to create that using a query. So how do we create a unique key constraint using a query? Now just like adding any other constraint, you add the unique key constraint in the same way. Obviously when you're adding a unique key constraint, you are altering the definition of the table, so you have to use alter table statement. So alter table TBL person, and how do we want to alter the table? By adding a unique key constraint. So add, what do we want to add? We want to add a constraint and give the constraint a meaningful name. So UQ for unique key constraint underscore, on which table are you creating this constraint? On TBL person table, and on which column, email column. Okay, so we are adding a constraint with this name, and obviously what type of constraint are you adding? A unique key constraint, so unique. And for which column are you creating this? Email. So that's it. So execute that. Now if you refresh the keys folder, expand this, you should see UQ TBL person email. Now let's try to insert a row into this table and see what's going to happen. So since this table has got 4 columns, we have to supply the values for these 4 columns. So insert into TBL person values, value for ID, let's say 1, name, let's say ABC, email, this is what is a.a.com, a@a.com, and gender ID, let's say 1, and age, let's say 20. Now let's insert this row. Okay, so if you look at this table, we've got a@a.com. Now let's try to insert maybe another person whose name is XYZ, and by mistake, or he is intentionally entering this a@a.com. Look at this, and remember, we already have a unique key constraint on this column. So if I try to enter this query, execute this query, we should get a unique key constraint violation error. So let's see that. When I press F5, look at this, violation of the unique key constraint, and look at the name of the constraint that we have created, UQ TBL person underscore email, and it clearly says cannot insert duplicate key in object TBL person. Alright, so how do we drop this constraint? Now, just like how we drop other constraints, we drop unique constraint in the same way. Obviously there are 2 ways to do that. One is you can go to the constraint, right click on that, and you have an option to delete that, or you can do that using a query. So how do we do that using a query? Drop constraint. So we want to drop a constraint and the name of the constraint. What's the name of the constraint? UQ TBL person underscore email. So when I press F5, obviously we have to use the alter table command. So alter table, which table? TBL person. And how do we want to alter that? By dropping the constraint. So press F5, so the constraint is dropped. Refresh the folder, and you should see that's gone. And if I try to execute this now, I will be able to insert a duplicate value for email address. Look at this, I have this duplicate. On this slide you can find resources for ASP.NET and C# interview questions. That's it for today. Thank you for listening. Have a great day.